The views and opinions expressed in The Fact Is with Hollis Grant are those of Hollis Grant and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of Droids Canada Network. Droids Canada Network does not take responsibility for any content or position produced by Hollis Grant and his show. Listener discretion is advised.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Thank you for tuning in to another edition of The Fact Is. I'm your host, Hollis Grant, on droidscanada.com. What a week it has been. We have situation in Afghanistan. We have the mental deterioration of President Biden. We have Justin Trudeau being heckled at every speaking event that he has attended all across the nation of Canada. And of course, we have COVID-19 surging on. The fourth wave is here. And the mutant variant, the Delta variant that we did cover many weeks ago, where we talked about this deadly variant that was being pushed along. But today, we have a new variant, a new, more deadly variant that is coming out to infect the world. Now, while Canada deals with vaccine passports and America is having the discussion about vaccine passports, a vaccine passport would allow citizens to get some of their freedoms back. As we head into flu season, which we have covered on past episodes, take a look at droidscanada.com, go back and have a listen, where we break down the numbers and the weeks where flu season starts. And we're heading into flu season. Most of you know, most people do know, you have a few sniffles. These are all signs of COVID. But Channel 9 News, an article that was put out, and their title was COVID-22 Does It Not Exist? No, a dangerous variant called COVID-22 does not exist. An expert predicted a more dangerous COVID-19 variant could evolve in 2022, but it doesn't exist yet, and it wouldn't be called COVID-22 if it did exist. The term COVID-22 went viral in late August, thanks to a tweet from Inside Paper, which shared an article from its website with the headline, quote, "New variant dubbed COVID-22 could be more deadly than Delta," expert warned. The Center for Disease Control and Prevention says the Delta strain is the most contagious version of COVID-19 yet. So the dire announcement sounded alarms for many. The original tweet received tens of thousands of likes, retweets, and replies. That is the article. Now, we're going to go over the ocean, and we're going to go to Swissinfo, swissinfo.ch. It's a Swiss website. And there's an article. Swiss scientist warns of possible COVID superstrain. A researcher at the Federal Technology Institute, ETH Zurich, has warned of the possible emergence of a new, quote, super variant of the coronavirus that could combine existing strains. It is very likely that a new variant will emerge and that we will no longer be able to rely on vaccinations alone, immunologist Cy Reddy told the Sonntagsblick newspaper. A new variant would definitely reach Switzerland, said Reddy, who works as an associate professor at the Department of Biosystems Science and Engineering of the Federal Technology Institute, ETH Zurich, in Basel. That's why we have to prepare for several vaccinations over the next few years, which will be continuously adapted to new variants, the 40-year-old scientist told the paper. He pointed to coronavirus variants from South Africa, the Beta, and Brazil, the Gamma, that have mutated, allowing them to partially evade antibodies. Delta, on the other hand, is much more contagious, but has not yet developed such mutations. If Beta or Gamma becomes more contagious, or if Delta develops mutations, then we could be talking about a new phase of the pandemic, said Reddy. This would become the big problem of the coming year. COVID-22 could be worse than what we are experiencing now. Since the end of June, the number of reported coronavirus infections has been rising in Switzerland. Hospital admissions are also increasing, but the death rate remains low. Just over 50% of the population are vaccinated against the virus. The growth in new cases is largely due to the highly infectious Delta variant affecting unvaccinated people, mainly the 10 to 29-year-old age group. In an interview this week, Tanya Stradler, the new head of Switzerland COVID-19 Science Task Force, said the current virus situation was, quote, very difficult. Reddy says he expects new COVID cases to rise further in Switzerland this autumn. If the vaccination rate does not increase rapidly, only severe restrictive measures can prevent the worst from occurring, he said. He noted that recent scientific findings show that the viral load of the Delta variant is so high that any unvaccinated person who contracts it can become a super spreader. Since children under 12 cannot be vaccinated, they represent a large group of potential super spreaders, said Reddy. The Delta variant can get around vaccinations partly because of its very high viral load, he noted. We need to counter this with a high level of antibodies, and that is exactly what a third booster dose of vaccine doses, he said. Now, there's your moving forward to your booster shots. We've mentioned that before in the past. The booster shots, the continuous lockdowns. We know that we are moving into yet another flu season. Strangely enough, there have been no flu cases throughout the world. So we know that there's no flu cases, but we have COVID-19 cases, because COVID-19 cases are flu cases. We know that COVID itself, the coronavirus, has been covered and listed under flu statistics. We've covered that on this show. So now we move into 2022. We move into flu season. We can expect in some countries complete lockdowns. We can go back to a vaccination or start of a vaccination process where a piece of paper must be supplied. Canada and Ontario's own Premier Doug Ford, which we've covered before, my friends, has stated before that he does not want to create a fractured society. But yet, my friends, he's going to introduce a vaccine passport, but then recanted on releasing that information and that plan because it's just not ready yet, and there are some details that need to be sorted out so that we do know a vaccine passport is coming. We do know that a vaccine passport is coming in British Columbia. COVID is not going away anytime soon. The mask mandates will be here at least for another year, while all these variants continue on. Now, how's the rest of the world treating this? How's the rest of the world looking at COVID-19? We know that Australia, for instance, YouTube has banned Sky News. Sky News is a typically conservative leaning news program, and that's been banned off YouTube. We know that people in Australia are receiving $1,900 fines for going out and breaking quarantine. We know that if you travel and arrive back in to Australia, one must put a sign up in front of their home to let everyone know that this person has traveled and is under quarantine for potential COVID. We're now marking individuals, and with a vaccine passport and digitizing vaccine passports, it's the natural evolution to track humans. And yes, we make the argument that cell phones do have microchips. Yes, I understand that your cell phone is a walking database. There's plenty of information. Banks buy that information. Banks love to know how one spends their money. Marketing companies love to know what excites a user to click, what ads to target. And when you have the certain settings on your phone, it's ad after ad of amazing product that you can consume time and time again. And banks are thirsty for that information. Banks want to know how to spend your money, because banks make money with every service transaction. So the more you spend, the more they make. And everyone's making money off of you. Even Big Pharma is making big money off you, because as you keep this pandemic going, and you need a third boost, a fourth boost, a fifth boost, who provides the vaccines? Big Pharma. Well, why is Big Pharma so important? Because there is so many key political figures in America that have connections to Big Pharma. Pfizer was the first of the COVID drugs to have FDA approval. Why are they the first to have FDA approval? Could it be that in 2020, Pfizer spent $3.7 million to lobby the government? And in 2009, Pfizer spent over $16.3 million lobbying members of the United States Congress, making it the sixth largest lobbying interest in the United States. A spokeswoman for Pfizer said the company, quote, wanted to make sure our voice is heard in this conversation in regards to the company's expenditure of $25 million in 2010 to lobby health care reform. Or could it be that Scott Gottlieb, that's Gottlib, he resigned as FDA commissioner in April of 2019 and joined the Pfizer board of directors 3 months later in July 2019. So a government man goes to work for Pfizer. Could it be that Pfizer is interested, and other pharmaceutical companies are interested, to keep the pandemic going, to keep these needles in, to make sure that the right people are in the right place to make these policies, all for your health? Because to the New York Times, an article says Pfizer gets $1.95 billion to produce coronavirus vaccine by year's end. Two pharmaceutical companies announced nearly $2 billion contract for 600 million doses of a vaccine, with the first 100 million promised before the end of the year. This is from July 22, 2020. And it goes on to talk about how much that deal was worth. Now, as long as you can keep that money coming in, $1.95 billion, you might want to make sure that you're spending 16 million to lobby the government to say we need to make sure that people are safe. We need to make sure that people don't get infected with this terrible virus. I'll ask the question, if it's such a terrible virus, why is there not a lineup in the morgue? Why are we not burying bodies in mass graves just so they're not rotting on the streets? Why are we shutting down the economy? Why are we forcing malls to die? Malls are a great waste of space. And when you look at rising immigration numbers and bringing people into the country, where will they live? That's retail space that's being taken up by urban sprawl in the suburbs. Well, you can pave down that mall because there's no one that goes to it anymore, and you can put up high-rise buildings, because more people that come to the country means more tax dollars, means more people comes in, means more votes, means your liberals, your Democrats that historically will always be the party of the immigrant and always will pander to new voters. Mind you, conservatives and Republicans will pander to anybody as well, but typically it's usually the higher numbers are put in by the left-leaning governments. And those numbers are backed up when you take a look at overall in the 80s, when the liberals had a tight run of the country. Immigration numbers were high. And they're high under Obama. They're high under Biden. Lots of people coming into the country means lots of new votes for these typically left-leaning socialist parties. But this coronavirus business is all about money. I personally do not believe that this is about governments taking control, turning into a communist country. Governments will do that anyway. This is all about making a lot of money, because the easiest money to make is by taking taxpayer dollars. For instance, when you look at government effectiveness, efficiencies, taking account with the recent situations in Afghanistan, a terrible situation, but how many hundreds of billions of dollars were spent training the Iraqi fighting force, set them up with a sophisticated air force, with a land force. Soldiers were estimated at 300,000 and were one of the finely tuned fighting machines in the region. And yet, province after province, they ceded territory without any fights. And now, because of government waste, government non-accountability, because nobody ever goes to jail these days, nor a politician will ever go to jail for mishandling taxpayers' money. But now the Taliban is outfitted with the finest of American equipment. This pandemic is fueled by greed of big pharmacy companies to make more money, and greed from politicians and quote-unquote scientists that have never practiced are leading the cause. If Pfizer stood behind their product and stood behind their vaccine, then why did their own CEO not receive the Pfizer COVID-19 vaccine? Their own CEO has not taken it. The people that make up the largest group of unvaccinated are PhD. The next largest group are high school educated. But your PhD are not vaccinated, and they're making their decisions based on the information that's available to them, the research that's available to them. We covered that on a past episode of what an actual definition of a vaccine is. We have people that are quote-unquote uneducated or high school education, don't want that. Why? Because they don't trust their government. And can you blame anyone for not trusting their government? If the government says that you have to do this, should you question it? Of course. Do your research, and you'll find that you're not alone. So as we look forward to flu season to ramp up, we can anticipate numbers for COVID-19 to increase, the Delta variant to increase, COVID-22 to increase, and we can look at more and more taxpayer dollars going into big pharma companies so we can get more and more vaccines that will do nothing. I'd like to thank you for tuning in to this edition of The Fact Is. I'm your host, Hollis Grant. Have yourself a great week.
Dan, what happens every Thursday?
That would be DCR Droids Canada Radio.
And what time is it out on Thursday?
That's from 9 till 11 p.m.
Dumb question, where do you find it?
You find that at accessradio.ca.
And what's the best part?
It's free.